Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia Laterio, and the topic I chose for this project is universal school meals. I was interested in this because I worked in a cafeteria a long time ago, and now I work in a as an instructional assistant at a school, and I see the problems within the school lunch program. And so now that we're in COVID, all students are allowed to get free lunches. And so it really was just something that interested me and I wanted to learn more about. So the two documentaries I chose were Cafeteria Man and A Place at the Table. Cafeteria Man is about this guy, Tony Gerasi, right here. He is a chef from New Orleans and he took over the head position of the food nutrition services in Baltimore. And so he had this grand vision of really changing the whole system. So what he did was he was able to procure some land to make small urban farms in the area for students to not only work and have like field trips to, but to also utilize the food that they grow in their schools. He also um, worked with local farmers in procuring fresh foods rather than going through the programs that they have been and getting like canned fruit. And then A Place at the Table, Jeff Bridges like narrates it. It's a really, really good documentary, and it talks about how poverty and the system have all worked together to create this food insecure issue, and that the system, both of these documentaries really talk about how the system is totally broken and how it just really has never evolved from what it was to what it needs to be now. So food insecurity, something I learned. Um, Obviously, it's not knowing where your next meal is coming from, but it is also food insecurity is also inadequate access to nutritious foods. So there are places in the US that they call food deserts, and these are places where there is no access to fresh fruits or maybe healthy foods. Um, they could be small little towns with just several stores that don't get they get looked over basically. So the deliveries from the big farms go to the big cities and they're overlooked by these little smaller towns. One thing I learned was that 75% of food deserts are in urban areas. So these are like populated areas. It's not like it's in the middle of nowhere. These are actually populated areas. So what happens is families are forced to travel sometimes 30, 40, 60 minutes just to get to fresh food. And when you're dealing with urban areas, you might be dealing with a lot more poverty. And so, do these people really have access to even get to these stores? And so that's what causes the problem. Um, Even though the movies were that I watched were several years ago, I looked up the statistics for 2019, most current. So 35 million people were food insecure in 2019, and that was a number that was lower than it has been in the past 20 years. And what that translates to was that there were just under 11 million children in 2019 that were considered food insecure. So, a little bit of background on this. So, in the 30s, there was a Great Depression, and in response to that, Um, there were several pilot programs for like a school lunch program. And then in 1946, there was like written into law the National School Lunch Program. And so the way that program worked was the government subsidized small farms. Back then, farms were family-owned farms mostly. And then they subsidize those farms. They subsidize the schools. They reimburse the schools from buying from those farms. So it kind of works hand in hand, you know, the government's funding this and funding that so that it kind of hopefully breaks even. But that's not what's happened because the system has not changed since then. So they started the school lunch program in 46. In the 70s, there was a huge uptick in food insecurity, and they started the school breakfast program. Within the 70s, um, the food insecurity issue was drastically reduced. What changed is the farming business. Farming business became so um, heavily subsidized, and they were subsidizing businesses that had turned into huge, large agribusinesses. So they were no longer small, family-owned farms. They were these huge farms, agribusiness, and these businesses were um, they were not producing, I guess, you know, natural, fresh, whole fruits. They were producing what was cheap. And what was cheap is grain, corn, wheat, stuff that can be um, very processed. So they were these large agribusinesses were um, were creating foods that were just highly processed, not nutritious. But because the system with the school, the National School Lunch Program, has not changed, the money stayed the same. And so now schools were left with increasing cost for fresh whole foods or, you know, buy what they can, which is what they could get from these large agribusinesses, which is highly processed packaged foods. So these are some of the issues that happen from food insecurity, and insecurity does not necessarily mean hunger again. It means not access to nutritious foods. So developmentally, there's compromised immune systems, speech and growth delays, chronic illness, and obesity. That was interesting to learn that how the two are tied. Because if children are only eating highly processed foods, that's what increases the rates of obesity. Emotionally, there's a stigma to being the kid that has to stand in the free lunch line. There's an embarrassment there, not only for the student, for the children, but for the families, for the parents too. It could lead to depression. Um, and I don't know if any of you have gone hungry for a day, but that could be an emotional roller coaster. It really can. Um, Behaviorally, in the classroom, there's a loss of focus, attention span. There's difficulty learning, following directions, and that ties into their developmental learning also. Um, and negative outbursts. There's one show, what one of the documentaries showed this woman and her son, and he wanted something so bad from the store, and she couldn't get it for him. And he's maybe 4, and he was just screaming. He was just screaming, like having a fit over a donut, you know. And so these kids are hungry, and they see something they want, and you know they don't possess they're kids, they don't have, you know, the maturity to deal with something like this. Okay, the most powerful moment for me was in Cafeteria Man. um, Tony Gerasi was sitting with a group of students, and what was great about him is that he involved his students and his staff through the whole process of him trying to change this system. And there was a student. So the kids went to one of their little farms and was able to experience all these different kind of herbs and spices and taste them and see where they came from and then see what they taste like in foods and try a bunch of different types of foods because he was trying to expose them to different things to see what they would want in the school and to show them what is possible. And this one student said, most of us grew up without a father. Some of us grew up without a mother and a father. So it's giving us our own voice. And finally, somebody is trying to hear us, trying to reach out to us. And we don't get a lot of that on a daily basis. So um, it was just such a powerful moment because you realize how powerful food is and how some of our kids are not getting that food. This student, this child was equating food with nurturing, with comfort, with connection, and it's something that he says that they don't get a lot about. And so, in response to that, later in the documentary, Tony said, helping a city heal itself using food as a vehicle. That was like his message. Um, so along those lines, where I'm kind of going with kind of going with this is what I see is something really wrong is our system. And if we're willing to bail out big corporations and not feed our children, that's just the truth of it. We're not investing in our future. We're making ourselves weaker as a nation by not investing in our future, and our future is our children, not big corporations. Um, and after all this, research, I feel universal school meals need more funding, and that they should be provided for all, regardless of economic status. Food is a right that our children deserve. So food helps their bodies develop. It nurtures their body. It gives them the nutrition that they need to fully develop, and not only their body but their brain. And withholding that, I feel there's something wrong with that. So thank you for listening. Something to think about, and I look forward to reading your responses. And then here's my references. Thank you so much.